Hello everyone, this is Count Triolo, bringing you another video talking about Star Trek Online. And for those of you that were paying attention on Facebook, today's video technically should have been talking about the Vengeance class and my particular build on that ship, the Kelvin Timeline Intel Dreadnought Cruiser. However, when I was starting to make that video, I kept on going on like 10-minute rants talking about why I didn't like the ship. And because of my experience on this channel, which sometimes some of my side notes and rants are things that people ask about in later videos, I felt that that particular rant was deserving in putting it into its own video. Even though this is going to be one of the shorter videos I've ever put on the channel, it's something that most people in Star Trek Online don't even know about, and even if they know about it, they don't talk about it too much, or that they've just worked around it. It's a problem. Um, I call it ship profiles, but it's basically the problem of why larger starships have issues with bridge observabilities at max distance. It's basically what it comes down to in this video. So I'm going to talk about in this video the two different types of ranges that exist inside the game, why it matters to know the difference, especially for what other starships that you're using, and just a list of some basic starships that are impacted the worst off of these. Anyway, feel free to see the time links in the description, but this is going to be one of the short videos on my channel, so you probably don't even need to worry about time links in this video, actually. But anyway, just as a quick disclaimer at the very beginning for this, because the problem this deals with hitboxes, actually, this isn't something that I can actually explore in great detail, because in order to do so, I would have to venture into hacking or breaking the game's code to be able to look at this in great detail for a lot of the different starships inside the game, which by Perfect World Entertainment's EULA, I can't actually do so. For those of you that are curious about that and are curious about things that you're allowed to do in the game, what things you aren't allowed to do, feel free to see this link right here. There's also the same link is going to be in the description for you all in case you're curious about it. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. When it comes to distances themselves inside the game, this is the way that I was taught, and everyone's always been told of how things work inside the game. You can't fire at enemies until you're within 10 kilometers of them, or 10,000 kilometers, whatever you want to talk about. And whenever you're within this distance, you can hit enemy starships, and enemy starships can hit you. Typically in the game, unless you're within this distance, enemies or Star Trek Online won't even let you fire at enemies until you're within that range. So you would assume, based on the programming, that since this will not let you until you get to this range, that obviously whenever you can fire, that it's going to be doing damage, right? Because that would be what you expect. But that's not actually how it works. So what's really going on underneath the surface is basically what we're seeing is that these things are basically just skins for the actual wire mesh stuff underneath of what's going on. The hitbox, because I can't dive into the code, I don't know if they're using spheres or if they're using cubes for the hitboxes. You would imagine that they would stick with cubes because that would be simpler, but if they're smart, they would have gone with spheres, as I'm showing here. But in any case, the distance that you're seeing inside the game is between whatever hitboxes that we have between the different starships. Based upon my experimentation, though, what's really happening is there's actually a second kind of hitbox that's going on inside the ship itself. And what the second one is actually the range in which our weapons are actually going to be doing from our ship, which is not the exact same as the size of the ship itself. So these two different distances is the distance to target, this yellow one from the previous slide, as well as the range to target, the range that our ship has to the enemy vessel, and the range that the enemy vessel has to us, which is from the little sphere inside the other ship to our big one, and then our little one to the big one of the other ship. The overlay, as I said, is its distance to target, which is this big sphere to this big sphere, which means that this is actually slightly off from what our weapons can actually, what our weapon's effective range for actually doing damage actually is. This range is always going to be a little bit different than this one. For all ships, that's the case. Your smaller ships, it's super insanely close. We're like ridiculously close to the point that it doesn't matter. But especially with your larger ships, you start to see this differential get even wider, which is very crucial for a lot of your science abilities, for instance. So yeah, as I said before, whenever you're looking at stuff inside the game, within your starship and enemies, this UI of like 9.5 kilometers, that is just distance from border of your ship to the border of the enemy ship, not the distance from the actual effective range inside a little one inside your ship to the actual border of the enemy ship. It's a different thing there. So why does this even matter? So first off, if you're beyond 10 kilometers, your weapons aren't going to be doing any damage whatsoever. The game won't let you do that either. However, if you're within the sweet spot, if you're within this 10 kilometers, but you're still outside of the 10 kilometers of the range for your weapons based upon the size of your ship, because of the two different spheres in here, you're going to have something really weird happen. Your weapons will fire while you're outside of this range, but inside of this one, but your weapons so far will do no damage, no procs whatsoever. And your science abilities won't do any damage either. They'll go on cooldown, and they won't activate either. So, like for instance, what's common for me, for instance, is when I forget about this differential and I'm flying the Vengeance, and I'm like right inside of the 10 kilometers, and I fire my gravity well, it's going to go on cooldown, and the gravity well effect's not even going to go off either, which really sucks. When it comes down to it, this bigger difference thing affects science builds a lot more than other builds because when it comes to most builds inside the game, you're going to have a lot of energy weapons on them, which, well, if energy weapons fire a little bit and don't do damage for a little bit, well, you're probably approaching an enemy, so you'll get past this distance really quickly after you get past this one. So it's not going to be as important or needful or necessary to think about as much because, well, you're going to be within that range anyway, and, well, if they're firing constantly outside that range, well, you're not going to be losing enough power to really worry about it either. When it comes down to it, if you're using a really small starship, you're not going to have to worry about this issue at all. It's that basically when it comes down to it, your larger starships basically have less effective range because you have to get inside of this larger distance in order for your weapons and your abilities to actually do damage. Even though you're inside of this distance, which means that if it's small starships you're fighting, it's more likely that they'll be inside of their actual range distance to be able to hurt you before you can actually hurt them. Something to think about. It's also something else you have to worry about outside of the lower turn rate and inertias that a lot of your larger starships have to deal with already inside the game. Here's just my little basic list of some of the more popular ships in the game, and ships that I, well, like or see a lot of people like. But generally, just general rule of thumb, if you're using the Narendra starship or stuff that's similar or smaller, you're not going to have to worry about this range issue that I'm talking about with ship profiles inside this video. So if you're using any science vessel or any escort, raptor, or raider, you don't have to worry about the stuff in this video. Basically, the range between you and your enemy ship is very, very, very close to what the actual range of your starship is actually going to be for dealing damage. In that same vein of thought, the 23rd century Supermos ships also don't have this issue because they're extremely small. Even though they actually have really, really good stats, considering they're really small size. Also, the Fleet Advanced Light Cruiser and the Fleet Flight Deck Assault Cruisers are also within this limit and are also really good starships too. However, if you have a Galaxy class starship or larger, you're going to have to deal with this issue, especially if you have AOE science abilities or like a gravity well that you're working with on your starships. So science dreadnoughts primarily have to worry about this. To a lesser extent, the Crossfield also has to worry about this, but it's not as bad as other science dreadnoughts. Your Kelvin Timeline cruisers also have to worry about this, so the Vengeance as well as the Kelvin Enterprise, but the Vengeance is much bigger, so it has a much worse effect on the Vengeance versus the Kelvin Enterprise. The Kelvin Enterprise is actually one of the best 4-4 ships in the game as a tank cruiser, but I might cover that in a different video entirely as to why. Also, of course, the Enterprise J also has this issue. It's like just about the biggest ship in the game, so of course it's going to have the issue. Also, the Vodwar Mercworker Juggernaut also is going to have this issue as well because it's a big starship. Your Tal Shiar starships, and also Miracle Worker cruisers because they're pretty big too. A little bit to a lesser extent, but it is still prevalent on them as well. So yeah, my TLDW for this video in general will show profiles of larger starships. If you're using a larger starship, and are going to use like a control ability like Gravity Well or Tychon's Rift, something like that, and you don't know, like you haven't experimented enough with your starship to know what that outer limit is for the real range of your weapons and bridge off your abilities, just be on the safe side and just wait until you're within 9.5 kilometers instead of 10 kilometers before you fire off any of your crucial offensive abilities at enemies. Most of your bigger starships only have to wait between 0.1 and 0.2 kilometers, less than that 10 kilometers, but if you have no idea, just wait until 9.5 to fire stuff. Also, just as an FYI, because of some of these differential issues, it's also why Raiders and Escorts are even stronger in PvP, because they don't have to worry about this at all either. And just as a reminder, if you want the full 10-kilometer range of your starship, just use a smaller starship like the 20th Century Promo starships if you have tons of money inside the game, or just use a Fleet Flytech Assault Cruiser or a Fleet Research Vessel that are earnable from your fleet. Just because they're very good, well-balanced, well-rounded ships that do not have this issue at all inside the game. But anyway, hopefully y'all enjoyed this. For those of you who are wanting the Vengeance video itself, I will be covering that on Thursday. I'm actually going to be recording that basically right after this video as well, so that I can, basically have this week off because it is the holidays, at least here in the United States. So feel free to like and subscribe if you like this content. Feel free to explore other videos if you found this valuable. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for subscribing and making this channel awesome. And enjoy the rest of your day.